Chapter 11. Moments of Recognition. In a way, we met in America before we met. Irene was a skinny, nearsighted beauty in waiting down in hot, sunny Florida where she grew up. Her parents owned a few apartment buildings there in the years before real estate exploded near the University of Miami. Irene was a shy, intelligent 16-year-old who developed a crush on this young college student in one of her parents' apartment buildings. Passionate but inexperienced, she had no idea how the hell to approach this fellow and flirt with him. My younger brother, Irv, was roommates with Errol, the guy on whom Irene had such a wild crush. Irene figured if she didn't have the nerve to approach Errol, maybe talking to his roommate might get her somewhere. So one day, when Irv was sitting by the side of the pool at the apartment complex, she sidled over to him and began a faltering conversation. She asked him about school and the usual nonsense, and then, to break one of those deadly silent moments that terrify most adolescents, she asked, "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" Irv, God bless him, said, "Yeah, I've got a brother up in New Jersey with a wife and kid. He's in real estate." Now, even as unaware as she was about past lives or heavenly planning, this was a moment Irene remembers to this day. When Irv mentioned my name, she felt an electric current move from the base of her spine right up into her heart. The way she tells it, the current was so strong it almost jolted her right out of her skin. And that is an example of divine intervention. Up in heaven, our angels were cheering and wiping their proverbial brows with relief. Our initial hookup had happened, and the next steps to bring us together could now go forward. Irene would remember the name Weinberg for sure, and, hopefully, also the fact that I was in real estate. These would be wake-up calls for her later in life when we actually met, like heavenly seeds planted to help activate her soul memory when we finally crossed paths this time around. Irene and I finally met as friends 14 years later. I did a real estate deal with her first husband, and we watched each other go through the hell of modern divorce. The reason Irene and I weren't able to find one another before marrying others was because our careful, heavenly plans were no match for the levels of personal suffering both Irene and I endured as we grew, which is just another example of how life on earth can mess with even the best of what a soul can hope for. Irene left her husband very shortly after she had her son, Matthew, because her husband was too wounded from a painful childhood to sustain a healthy relationship with either her or their son. 3 months later, I left my wife after years of misunderstanding and pain. Our disagreements had finally escalated into a daily life that was tearing our children apart. During this time, Irene and I gave each other the courage we needed to release the past and move into the present. Since the day we'd first met, I'd thought Irene was something else. A little shy, maybe, and a little more structured than I was comfortable with, but I couldn't get away from a feeling of always wanting her near me whenever I saw her. Finally, living with my feelings stuffed beneath the surface wasn't enough. It was time to do something about it. When both of us were newly separated, we spent an afternoon together, helping each other with errands. At the end of the day, the kids were playing in my house while Irene and I talked in the kitchen. She had some outfit on that had been driving me nuts all day. I'd been watching the way she moved and breathed. I'd been mesmerized by the pulse beating in her neck. Before I knew it, I had her in my arms, and I was kissing her like I had never, ever kissed anyone before. Deep and sweet and soul-searching. Irene was taken totally by surprise. Being the soul of rectitude, she wouldn't ever have considered such a thing without a formal declaration between the two of us. This time, though, She decided on an impulse to kiss me right back, meeting me in that moment with all the passion and power of her whole being. I thought I was going to explode right there in the kitchen. I'd never felt such heat, such a magnetic pull in all the days of my life. After that, we couldn't stay away from each other. That was it. If we were together in a room at all, we were touching. When we were alone, forget it. We were lucky the bed didn't collapse from the force of how we loved each other. I was a middle-aged fellow who'd never known such love. It literally took me over. All I could think about was Irene, keeping my head above water in business. Irene, helping my kids survive their transitions. And Irene. The passion I felt for each of those concerns was enough to give me heart palpitations on a daily basis. Irene was as gone as I was. Divorce was still new in those days, and for two recently separated people to get together like we did, with such obvious adoration of each other, was not considered socially appropriate behavior. Irene was stepping outside the mold and going against traditional society's dictates in order to love me. Never before in her life had she gone against the status quo. That alone should prove how gaga she was over me. We both had to put up with an enormous amount of risk and pain to be together. People in our community, for example, spent a good deal of their time labeling us in nasty ways. And our ex-spouses? Oy, what a mess! Irene's first husband stopped functioning outright for a while, leaving her and Matthew alone to survive on her modest salary. And since there were issues with her family, she couldn't possibly turn to them for help. My sweet Irene was hanging out there like ripped underwear on a clothesline in a windstorm. As for me, I had so many messes I could barely keep up. My first wife had hit the roof when I'd left, doing everything she could to make my life as difficult as possible. Money, custody, trauma, drama, you name it. Irene and I never knew what was going to hit us next. If only I'd run in the other direction or stopped seeing Irene altogether, everything in my legal situation would immediately have calmed down. But I couldn't do it. I never even considered it. We were lovers in a battle zone, choosing to focus on loving rather than on fighting, and becoming more and more deeply welded with every new challenge we met as a couple. I remember one incident especially well. Irene's work sent her on buying trips to the Orient. She'd been gone for a good 2 weeks, and you know what an eternity 2 weeks can feel like when you're in love and apart from one another. While she was gone, one of my friends convinced me to go with him to this singles place down in Florida. People were going crazy, sleeping with each other at the drop of a hat, drinking to excess, stuffing cocaine up their noses at every opportunity. Mind you, these were middle-class professionals, people who should have known better. It didn't take me long to realize there is no place like home, and my home was Irene. Before this trip, I had been aware of my constant physical desire for her, but now I was suddenly face to face with how few women like her there were in the world. She was honorable, passionate, and dependable, and an incredible mother. Looking out at that sea of well-tanned fleshpots and those silly, middle-aged men acting like crazy teenagers made me appreciate Irene more than ever. I'd never known a woman capable of such open surrender. She loved my earthy, powerful body with a complete and unconditional delight. In the face of all that empty connecting going on in that single scene, I suddenly saw the full extent of the connection Irene and I were growing. I saw the way our passion was supported by the framework of unspoken integrity we shared. Irene's beliefs about family, life, and the world were identical to mine. I'd never been able to articulate them, Yet she daily embodied those values in the choices she made for us and our kids. You've got the picture here. Secular guy has moral awakening in Sodom and Gomorrah. So what did I do with this profound and terrifying revelation? I hightailed it home, found the largest bouquet of flowers I could lay my hands on, and got myself over to meet Irene at the airport. The minute she set foot off the plane, I leapt, in my best flat-footed but hopefully romantic Jersey businessman style, over the turnstile. Irene plotzed at the sight of me. Well, that and the fact that I almost landed right on top of her. Once she recovered, I took her in my arms and asked her to marry me. She agreed, and we went home and made love until there was almost nothing left of either one of us. I don't want to leave you here with the impression that every moment of our first years together was a bed of roses, sweetness, and peace. We had plenty of good arguments at the beginning as we moved in together and started building a decent, blended family. Sometimes it felt like our families were in the same shape France and England had been in after World War II, wounded and maimed, but bravely rebuilding. We had a time of it with the kids, that's for sure. Irene and I were virtual pioneers when we sought counseling for our children and ourselves. We agonized every day over how best to help them have reasonably normal childhoods. One argument we had about my son, Bruce, during our first year together was a watershed moment for us as a couple. One of those built-in wake-up calls from heaven meant to keep me on the right track despite my distractions. Bruce was an extremely bright, creative kid who perceived the truth about the behavior of all the adults in his life with a maturity beyond his years. This is enough to make anyone a little off-center. Add teenage male hormones and a very permissive middle-class culture into that mix, and you've got an accident waiting to happen. On the advice of a very good family psychologist, I placed Bruce in an excellent boarding school during the worst of my divorce troubles. The idea was to keep him out of the battle zone and give him the structure he needed to survive his adolescence. It worked beautifully for a full school year, with the end of that time coinciding with the first year I seriously dated Irene. He came to live with me for the summer. After not having the benefit of my fathering for over a year and seeing me madly in love with a new partner, Bruce began acting out. One night, having reached the end of my patience, I told Irene I'd decided to send him back to boarding school. She pitched a holy fit because she knew what it was like to be cut away from family in that way. For years after marrying her first husband, her father not only had cut her out of the family, he had also insisted the rest of her extended family cut her out as well. There was no way Irene was going to stand by and watch someone else be sent away. On the night I lost it with Bruce, Irene really spoke her mind. "Saul, maybe it worked the first time, sending him away. But your life is different now. You have me. We're making a decent home together. I know how it hurts to be shut out. If we do that to Bruce now, as we begin to build our family, he will always feel like an outsider. He's a beautiful, talented kid who's acting out the pain around him and inside him. My gut tells me that as difficult as he is right now, he needs our love, stability, and this family life more than anything. We can give this to him. I don't feel right about your sending him away. As much as I love you, Saul, this matters enough to me that if you do this, I will not be able to live with you." I couldn't see what she was getting at, and to threaten to leave me over it, for crying out loud. All I knew was my kid was driving me nuts, and the whole thing was making me feel like a failure. But I trusted Irene. I knew she was right. I was so fed up with the whole thing, I did what any self-respecting male would do. I went out and sat in my car. I must have sat there for a good hour and a half thinking everything through. Damn, it made me mad. I hated seeing my boy in so much pain. I wanted to help him more than anything in the world, and I couldn't bear the prospect of trying to help him and failing. So there I was, frustrated, out in my car, and there Irene was, sweating bullets in the house. She'd taken the risk of losing me just to make a stand for my boy. My boy! What a woman! My love for my son, along with Irene's steadfast devotion to both Bruce and me, finally won out. I went inside the house and made peace with her. Later that night, I took her in my arms and made love to her like there was no tomorrow. I couldn't think of a better way to thank her. Beyond giving me back my son, she had succeeded in giving me one of the greatest gifts one human being can give another. She'd helped me stay on track with my sole purpose.